Picture it. You're sitting in a great, candlelit opera house in 17th century Italy. The orchestra begins to swell, filling the room with an almost palpable thickness in your chest. And then, through the air slices a voice pure, soaring, angelic. It's like nothing you have ever heard. The singer? There is just a boy, no older than 7 or 8 years old, who in another life would be playing on the street and having much fun with all his comrades. He stands on stage and sings as if the soul of an angel had gotten into his body. Yet this was no divine gift, came at an unimaginable cost. Suppose I told you that this boy's life would never be his own again, not because of the fame he was destined to achieve, but because of a horrific procedure that forever changed his body and soul. This is the haunting story of the castrati, voices of beauty born from tragedy. Opera, as we know it, is a product of the 16th and 17th centuries, a new genre of art that united music, drama, and great sceneries into one overwhelming performance that swept Europe off its feet. Meanwhile, churches and all sorts of religious institutions did their best to find voices reminiscent of divinity, voices able to climb up to the heavens with all their purity and ethereal beauty. They yearned to hear those high, heavenward notes that lift the soul and invoke God's presence among them. One problem remained. The male voice simply couldn't reach those lofty heavens. No man could sing like an angel. So a solution was found, a solution as dark as it was ingenious. The answer was the castrati. What necessity was that birthed this practice soon spiraled into something far more sinister. What had, as its root, a certain musical need, turned into exploitation in which young boys were obliged to endure incredible pain and sacrifice in the name of art. To create a castrato, boys were selected at an extremely young age, usually around 7 or 8, just before the onset of puberty. Their families, often impoverished, faced a fateful decision: to sacrifice their son's future manhood in exchange for the possibility of wealth, fame, and social mobility. The operation itself was not less terrible. Without anesthesia, disinfection of wounds, and qualified surgeons, these boys were subjected to this brutal operation under the most unsanitary and improvised conditions. Many did not survive. Those who survived had physical and emotional scarring, became infertile, and their vocal cords would never be the same again. The result was that their voices remained frozen in a state of childlike purity, never maturing into the deeper tones of adulthood. But at what price? Unspeakable. Pain, trauma, lifelong suffering. These boys were doomed to lifelong slavery to their voices and their bodies sold to art. Why would parents do this to their children? The reason relates to the harsh realities of life in the 17th century. To most families, this wasn't just one opportunity, it was the only opportunity. In a world where the future for an individual was all but predetermined by poverty, the prospect of both fame and fortune, not to mention the protection created by the status afforded a castrato, proved simply too great to be resisted. Of course, religious institutions played a big role. The churches not only wanted those angelic voices, but kept and promoted the idea of some kind of chosen destiny for those boys, that this is God's gift. They were making the families believe this sacrifice was not just one avenue toward success, but rather a calling from above. An unwritten compact it was, the promise of fame and fortune, the charm of the ethereal voices, and then there was the hope for class rise. Yet, right from behind the screen, they lost their identity and humanity, the boys. Now let's talk about the paradox of the castrati's fame. These men, who had been boys when they were transformed, became some of the most celebrated figures of their time. Take Farinelli, for example, arguably the most famous castrato in history. He was more than a singer. He was a living legend. The voice of Farinelli could move kings and queens to tears. His songs touched the heavens, and he was known far and wide, his fame unparalleled. He was adored, idolized, and worshipped for his extraordinary talent. But this came at a terrible price. Farinelli and his kind were adored for their voices, but their lives had to be bereft of things that other men took as a matter of course. They could not marry, could not have children, could not even hunt, or live like normal people. All their lives were dominated by the voice, not by them. The castrati, in essence, were stuck in a vicious circle, enslaved by their fame, their beauty, and their talent. The very thing that made them extraordinary commanded their lives, their voices. It is not a question of music, of fame, of fortune, the castrati as such, but one of human trafficking, of the body's commercialization. These children are subjects of dreams and ambitions, yet they were considered nothing but instruments, their voice to be trained to produce music and sing. Their bodies had been merely vehicles for an ideal of beauty and talent, while the humanness in them had become quite inconsequential. We no longer see castrati on stage, but the pressures toward ideals of beauty, perfection, and talent are equally relentless today. Consider the fashion and entertainment industries, or all the ways that youth are being pressured to look and act a certain way. It is as if, even now, society still exploits individuals to meet its demands for beauty and success. The story of the castrati teaches us that only too often in history, a person's talents or their appearance have been regarded by society as more important than humanity itself. The castrati are the lesson learned in man's pursuit of perfection and beauty at all costs. What, then, might we take away from castrati history? An omen, a reminder that our desires for beauty and perfection can take us down dark and misbegotten roads. The fate of these boys who were ruined for art shows us what exploitation and commodification does. For every instance a person is struck by somebody's talent or beauty, the question ought to be, at what cost did that brilliance come? What price was paid for this greatness? Even today, talent and beauty are rewarded in this world, sometimes at the cost of human dignity. The lesson is simple, not for their talents or for their beauty, but for the fact that they are humans. Every human being merits respect, dignity, and compassion. No person shall be treated as a commodity whose worth would be determined by what he can do or by his looks. Let us remember the sad and sorry tale of the castrati to consider, rather than as some curiosity from the past, alive to remind us how far we have come and how far we have yet to go in valuing humanity above perfection. These boys were more than their voices. They were human beings. Their story dares us to question in whose name we make sacrifices unto beauty and success. And so, as we go out into the world today and going forward, let us reflect on this. What are our sacrifices today? More to the point, how do we make sure no one is ever objectified to a commodity whose worth has been measured by talents or a body? Let us not forget throughout life's reality that beauty lies not in perfection, but in the depth of our character and the kindness of our hearts. If this story has led you to reflect upon how we value beauty and human potential, take this as a call to action. Let's treat each other with the due respect and dignity that we all deserve, since it is therein that true humanity lies.